The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Sweetwater Creek, Texas, as Willow Mackenzie ducked behind the water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was 1879, and she'd just been accused of stealing a horse she'd rightfully purchased. That wasn't the worst of it. They were calling her lazy, a drifter, a no-good woman who couldn't be trusted. All because she refused to marry the banker's son and instead chose to run her father's ranch alone after his passing. "Come out, Willow. We know you're hidden there." Sheriff Tanner bellowed, his voice carrying across the main street. Willow pressed her back against the wooden trough, her fingers trembling as they gripped the deed to her father's ranch. She hadn't stolen anything. The banker wanted her land, and when she refused to sell, they'd concocted this story about her stealing the very horse her father had given her before his death. I said, "Come out." Another shot fired into the air. "That's enough." A deep voice cut through the commotion. "Lower your weapon, Sheriff." Willow peered around the edge of the trough to see a tall man dismounting from a magnificent black stallion. His worn leather vest and dusty hat marked him as a cowboy, but the confident way he strode toward the sheriff suggested he was no ordinary ranch hand. "This ain't your business, Zachary," Sheriff Tanner spat. "When you're terrorizing innocent women in broad daylight, I make it my business," the cowboy replied, his hand resting casually on his holster. "Now, I believe Miss Mackenzie has the bill of sale for that horse in her saddlebag." "Why don't you check before making accusations?" The sheriff's face reddened. "Banker Holloway says." "I don't care what Holloway says. Check the bill of sale." Willow stood shakily, clutching the paper in her hand. "It's right here, Sheriff, paid in full 6 months ago." Zachary Valentine turned toward her, and Willow felt her breath catch. His eyes were the color of a summer storm, and despite the trail dust on his clothes, there was something undeniably striking about him. "They call her lazy," someone muttered from the gathering crowd. Zachary's gaze never left Willow's face as he responded loud enough for everyone to hear, "Then let her rest beside me." He extended his hand toward her. "Come on, Miss Mackenzie. I'll escort you home." The boldness of his statement sent whispers rippling through the crowd. Willow hesitated only a moment before accepting his hand. She didn't know this man, but anything was better than facing the sheriff and his posse alone. As they rode side by side out of town, Willow studied her unexpected savior. "Why did you help me back there, Mr. Valentine?" "Call me Zach," he said, adjusting his hat. "And I helped because I've seen how Holloway operates. He's been trying to buy up all the land around Sweetwater Creek since they found silver in the hills." "Silver?" Willow's eyes widened. "On my land," Zach nodded. "Your father knew. That's why he never sold, no matter how much Holloway offered." "How do you know my father?" "Robert Mackenzie gave me my first job when I was just 18. I owe him my life." Zach's expression softened. "I've been away driving cattle to Kansas. When I returned and heard about his passing, I came to pay my respects." Willow felt tears threatening. It had been 3 months since her father died, and she'd been fighting Holloway's attempts to take her land ever since. "Thank you," she whispered. As they approached the Mackenzie ranch, Willow noticed the state of disrepair. The fence needed mending, and the barn roof had a hole where a tree branch had fallen during the last storm. She'd been working sunup to sundown, but there was simply too much for one person to manage. "You've been trying to run this place alone?" Zach asked, surveying the property. "I have no choice," Willow replied, dismounting her horse. "The hands left after father died. Holloway convinced them I couldn't pay." "And they call you lazy," Zach scoffed, dismounting beside her. "I've known men twice your size who couldn't handle half of what you're doing." Willow felt a flush of appreciation. It had been a long time since anyone had defended her. "It doesn't matter what they call me. I just need to keep this ranch." "Let me help," Zach offered, removing his hat. "I owe your father that much." "I can't pay you," Willow admitted. "I'm not asking for payment." His eyes met hers. "Just a place to stay and maybe some of that stew I smell cooking." Willow couldn't help but smile. "Deal." Over the next several weeks, Zach proved himself invaluable. He mended fences, repaired the barn roof, and helped Willow with the small herd of cattle her father had left behind. They worked side by side from dawn until dusk, and Willow found herself looking forward to their evenings by the fire, where Zach would share stories of his travels. "How did you become a cowboy?" she asked one night as they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "I was orphaned young," Zach replied, his voice low. "Spent some time in an orphanage in St. Louis until I was 16, then headed west. Did odd jobs until your father hired me." He smiled at the memory. "Robert taught me everything: how to rope, ride, mend fences." "He never mentioned you," Willow said, curious. Zach's expression dimmed. "We had a disagreement. I wanted to see more of the country, drive cattle on the big trails. He thought I should settle down." He glanced at Willow. Maybe he was right. The way he looked at her made her heart skip. She'd been so focused on survival that she hadn't allowed herself to notice how handsome he was, or how the sound of his laughter made her feel lighter somehow. The next morning, they were interrupted by the arrival of 3 riders. Banker Holloway, his son Curtis, and Sheriff Tanner approached the house, their expressions grim. "Miss Mackenzie," Holloway called, his voice artificially pleasant, "I've come with a final offer for your land." $500 more than generous considering the state of things. Willow stood firm on her porch. "This land isn't for sale, Mr. Holloway, not at any price." Holloway's false smile vanished. "You can't run this ranch alone, girl. Everyone in town knows you're barely managing. They call you lazy because you can't keep up with a man's work." Zach stepped forward, his stance protective. "She's not alone, and she's done more work in the past month than most men do in a year." Curtis Holloway sneered. "Look at this. The drifter's sweet on the laziest girl in Texas." Zach's hand moved to his gun, but Willow touched his arm. "They're not worth it," she whispered. "You have 1 week to reconsider," Holloway said, turning his horse. "After that, the bank will foreclose. You're behind on your loan payments." After they left, Willow sank onto the porch steps. "He's right. I am behind on payments. Father borrowed money to expand the herd just before he died." Zach sat beside her. "How much do you owe?" $200. "The cattle would bring enough, but not until the fall drive." Zach was quiet for a moment. "I have savings. Let me help." "No," Willow shook her head firmly. "I won't take your money." "Then we'll find another way," Zach promised. "Your father wouldn't want you to lose this place, especially not to Holloway." That night, unable to sleep, Willow walked outside to find Zach sitting by a small fire near the barn. She wrapped her shawl tighter and joined him. "Can't sleep?" he asked, making room for her on the log he was using as a seat. "Too much worry," she admitted. They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Zach spoke. "Why did you stay after your father died?" "You could have gone east, found an easier life." Willow watched the flames dance. "This land has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandmother came here as a bride when there was nothing but wilderness. She and my grandfather built this place from nothing." She looked up at the star-filled sky. "Besides, I love it here, the openness, the freedom, even with all the work, the hardship, especially then," she smiled. "There's something honest about working with your hands, watching things grow because of your effort." She glanced at him. "Why did you come back, after all your traveling?" Zach poked the fire with a stick. "I was restless for a long time, thought I needed to see everything, do everything, but the more places I went, the more I realized I was looking for something I'd already found here." "And what was that?" Willow asked softly, "A place that felt like home." His eyes met hers across the fire, and Willow felt something shift between them. Before either could speak again, the sound of approaching horses broke the silence. Zach was on his feet instantly, reaching for his gun. "Inside," he ordered, but it was too late. 5 riders circled the yard, their faces obscured by bandanas. "Evening, folks," one called out. "Heard there might be some silver on this property." Willow recognized the voice. It was Curtis Holloway, poorly disguised. "There's no silver here," she said firmly. "And you're trespassing." The leader laughed. "We're just having a friendly look around, unless you'd rather sell to my father now and save yourself the trouble." Zach stepped forward. "You heard the lady, this is private property." One of the riders pulled his gun. "Stay out of this, cowboy." What happened next was a blur. The first shot went wide, but it was enough to startle Willow's horse, tethered nearby. The animal bolted, knocking into 2 of the riders. In the confusion, Zach tackled Curtis from his horse, and Willow ran for the rifle kept above the door. Shots were fired, and Willow heard Zach cry out. Her heart in her throat, she fired the rifle into the air. "The next one won't miss," she shouted. The intruders retreated, dragging Curtis with them. Willow rushed to Zach, who was clutching his side. "You're hurt," she gasped, seeing blood seeping through his fingers. "It's just a graze," he winced as she helped him inside. By lamplight, Willow cleaned and bandaged his wound. It was indeed just a graze, but it could have been much worse. Her hands trembled as she worked. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "You could have been killed." Zach caught her hand. "I promised to help protect this ranch. That includes protecting you." Willow met his gaze, suddenly aware of how close they were. "Why, you hardly know me." "I know enough," he said softly. "I know you're the strongest person I've ever met. I know you love this land with your whole heart. And I know that when I'm with you, I don't feel restless anymore." Willow's heart pounded as Zach leaned closer, his hand gentle against her cheek. When his lips met hers, it felt like coming home after a long journey. She melted into the kiss, all her worries momentarily forgotten. The next morning, they rode into town together. If Holloway was willing to resort to violence, they needed allies. Their first stop was the telegraph office, where Zach sent a message to an old friend who worked as a marshal in Fort Worth. As they walked down the main street, Willow was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed them. "They're still calling me lazy," she muttered. Zach took her hand, unconcerned with the gasps this public display elicited. "Then let them see you rest beside me," he said loud enough for others to hear. "And let them see us work together to build something they can only dream of." Their next stop was the assay office. If there truly was silver on the Mackenzie land, they needed to know how much and where. The assayer, Mr. Peterson, was initially reluctant to help, clearly intimidated by Holloway's influence. "I'll double your fee," Zach offered, placing coins on the counter. Peterson looked from the money to Willow's determined face. "I'll come out tomorrow," he agreed finally. "But if Holloway asks, I was checking for water sources, not minerals." On their way back to the ranch, they stopped at the small homestead of Thomas Cooper, a neighbor who had always been friendly with Robert Mackenzie. Cooper listened to their story with growing concern. "Holloway's been buying up land all around here," he confirmed. "Offered me twice what my place is worth last month. Did you take it?" Willow asked. Cooper shook his head. "This land is my children's inheritance. Besides, something didn't sit right about his eagerness." "Will you stand with us if it comes to a fight?" Zach asked directly. Cooper looked between them. Robert was a good man, and no one should lose their land to underhanded tactics. He nodded firmly. "My sons and I will stand with you." By the time they returned to the ranch, 3 more of Willow's father's old friends had agreed to help. The word was spreading that Willow Mackenzie was fighting back against Holloway's schemes. The assayer arrived the next day, spending hours examining samples from different parts of the property. His findings confirmed their suspicions. There was indeed silver, not a massive deposit, but enough to make the land valuable. "This explains Holloway's interest," Zach said as they pored over the rough map Peterson had drawn. "The vein runs right through your property and into his existing holdings." "So he needs my land to access the silver?" Willow asked. "Exactly. Without it, his mining operation would be much less profitable." Armed with this knowledge, they formulated a plan. Willow would apply for a mining claim on her own land, legally establishing her rights to any minerals found. Meanwhile, Zach would ride to the county seat to file a formal complaint against Holloway for harassment and attempted claim jumping. The night before Zach was to leave, they sat together on the porch swing, their shoulders touching as they rocked gently. "I'll only be gone 3 days, Zach promised, his fingers intertwined with hers. "A lot can happen in 3 days, Willow replied, thinking of Holloway's threat. Their week was almost up. Zach turned to face her. "I've been thinking about what happens after we deal with Holloway." Willow's heart skipped. "And I don't want to leave," he said simply. "These past weeks with you, I've never felt more at home, more myself." Willow squeezed his hand. "I don't want you to leave either. Your father once told me that a man isn't measured by how far he roams, but by what he builds and who he builds it with." Zach's voice was soft in the gathering twilight. "I want to build something here with you." Willow leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'd like that very much." The next morning dawned crisp and clear. Zach prepared for his journey while Willow packed him food for the ride. As he mounted his horse, she handed him a small token, her father's pocket watch, For luck, she said. Come back to me. Zach leaned down from the saddle and kissed her, a promise in the gentle pressure of his lips. Nothing could keep me away. After he rode off, Willow turned her attention to fortifying the ranch. Cooper and his sons arrived to help, along with 3 other neighbors. They reinforced the doors and windows, moved the cattle to a hidden pasture, and established a watch rotation. If Holloway came looking for trouble, they would be ready. 2 days passed without incident. Willow began to hope that perhaps Holloway had reconsidered his tactics. Then, as the sun set on the second day, a rider approached at full gallop. It was Cooper's youngest son, his face streaked with dust and sweat. Miss Mackenzie, Holloway's gathered a group of men. They're saying they have papers to foreclose on your ranch. They'll be here by morning. Willow's stomach knotted with fear. Zach won't be back until tomorrow evening at the earliest. We'll hold them off, Cooper assured her, checking his rifle. Just until Valentine returns with the marshal. That night, no one slept. Willow sat by the window, watching the road, praying that Zach would somehow return early. As dawn broke, she saw the dust cloud that signaled approaching riders. Holloway led a group of 10 men, including the sheriff. They pulled up in front of the house, where Willow and her allies waited on the porch. "This is your last chance, Miss Mackenzie," Holloway called. "I have foreclosure papers signed by Judge Wilson himself. This property now belongs to the bank." "Those papers are fraudulent," Willow replied steadily. "I've never missed a payment." Holloway smiled coldly. "The judge says otherwise. Sheriff, do your duty." Sheriff Tanner dismounted, looking uncomfortable as he approached the porch. "Miss Mackenzie, I need you to vacate the premises." Cooper stepped forward. "This isn't right, Sheriff, and you know it." Tension crackled in the air as both sides stood their ground. Just as it seemed violence was inevitable, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Zach rode at the front, flanked by a man wearing a marshal's badge and 4 deputies. Relief flooded Willow as she rushed down the steps to meet them. "Right on time," she said, her voice shaking slightly as Zach dismounted. "Told you I'd come back," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers even as he addressed the gathering. "Marshal Thompson has some interesting news for you, Holloway." The marshal stepped forward, unfolding an official-looking document. "Cornelius Holloway, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted claim jumping, and conspiracy to commit murder." Holloway's face drained of color. "This is outrageous. I'm a respected businessman." "We have sworn statements from the real Judge Wilson, who confirms he never signed any foreclosure papers for the Mackenzie Ranch," the marshal continued. "And your son Curtis has been quite talkative since his arrest yesterday in Fort Worth." The sheriff looked confused. "Curtis, arrested." "Attempted murder," Zach explained. "He confessed to organizing the nighttime attack on Miss Mackenzie's property. Seems he was trying to impress his father." What followed was a flurry of activity as Holloway and several of his men were arrested. The sheriff, realizing he'd been duped, offered a stammering apology to Willow. By afternoon, the ranch was quiet again, though news of Holloway's arrest had spread throughout the county. As the sun began to set, Willow and Zach finally had a moment alone. They walked hand in hand to the ridge overlooking the ranch, where the golden light cast long shadows across the land. "It's really over," Willow said, still hardly believing it. "The ranch is safe." Zach nodded, pulling her close. "And Holloway will face justice for what he tried to do." Willow looked up at the man who had changed her life in just a few short weeks. "What happens now?" "Now," Zach said, his eyes reflecting the sunset, "we build something together, if that's still what you want." "It is," Willow replied without hesitation. "More than anything." Zach took both her hands in his. "Your father would be proud of you, Willow. You fought for this land when everyone said you couldn't do it, when they called you lazy because you were a woman trying to do a man's job." "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. "That's not true." "You would have found a way," he smiled. "But I'm glad I was here to help, and I want to be here for whatever comes next." He hesitated, suddenly looking nervous. "Willow Mackenzie, I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you." "Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Willow's eyes as joy blossomed in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Zach lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as they both laughed. When he set her down, his kiss was tender, a promise of all the days to come. 3 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Willow and Zach were married under the ancient oak tree that had stood watch over the Mackenzie ranch for generations. The entire community came to celebrate, including those who had once whispered behind Willow's back. Now they watched with respect as she and Zach exchanged vows, partners in every sense of the word. The silver mine on their property proved profitable enough to clear all debts and fund improvements to the ranch. They built a larger barn, expanded the herd, and hired hands to help with the increasing workload. But despite their growing prosperity, Willow and Zach continued to work the land themselves, side by side from dawn until dusk. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching the sun set over the land they both loved. Sometimes Zach would play his harmonica, the sweet notes drifting across the twilight air as Willow rested her head on his shoulder. A year after their wedding, their family grew with the birth of their daughter, Rebecca. Zach paced nervously outside their bedroom during the delivery, but when the midwife finally allowed him in, the sight of Willow holding their child erased all his anxiety. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "She is," Willow agreed, her tired face radiant with happiness. As Rebecca grew, she became her father's shadow, following him around the ranch and learning everything from how to mend fences to how to calm a frightened calf. By the time she was 5, she could ride almost as well as her mother. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons planting and harvesting, calving and driving cattle to market. The Zachary Valentine ranch prospered under their joint care, becoming one of the most successful operations in the county. Willow and Zach welcomed 2 more children, Robert, named for Willow's father, and Elizabeth, who had Zach's storm gray eyes. 10 years after their wedding, on a warm summer evening much like the one when they first kissed, Zach found Willow sitting on their porch swing, watching their children play in the yard. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her. Willow smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I was just thinking about how they used to call me lazy." Zach chuckled, wrapping his arm around her, "and how I said you could rest beside me. Did you mean it, even back then?" she asked. "Or was that just a line to impress a lady in distress?" "I meant every word," Zach assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "From the moment I saw you standing up to the sheriff, I knew you were something special, the most hardworking, determined woman I'd ever met. And now," Willow teased, turning to face him. "Now," Zach said, his eyes filled with the same love she'd seen on their wedding day, "I know you're the heart of everything good in my life. This ranch, our children, our home, none of it would exist without you." Willow cupped his face in her hands. "And you are the strongest, kindest man I've ever known. I thank God every day that you came back to Sweetwater Creek." Their lips met in a kiss that still held all the passion of their early days, deepened by years of shared joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Willow traced the scar on Zach's side, a permanent reminder of the night he defended her against Holloway's men. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The traveling, the freedom of the open trail." Zach caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Not for a single day," he answered honestly. "Everything I was looking for, I found right here with you." In the years that followed, the legend of Willow Mackenzie and Zachary Valentine became part of Sweetwater Creek's history. How a woman called lazy by those who didn't understand her strength found a cowboy who saw her true worth. And together, they built a legacy that would endure for generations. And on quiet evenings, long after their children had grown and started families of their own, Willow and Zach could still be found sitting side by side on their porch swing, watching the sunset over the land they'd fought for and loved, resting together after a day's honest work, exactly as they were always meant to be.